How are we doing today? If you're feeling great, let's just clap our hands or show some type of movement, because that is part of being human. How are we feeling? Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and tuning into our conversation. Dr. Marcia is a gift. Being human and being present is something that we cannot take for granted. Being human, to me, is a way of honoring your breath, your presence, whether it is a day that we are feeling conflicted to days where we're feeling like we can conquer anything. So today, I thank you, Dr. Marcia, for writing the book and showing visual examples of how we're able to be present. But every book, every journey has a beginning. So I would love to start off with asking you, what does it mean to be human to you?
Being human is recognizing that we are not perfect, is being imperfect. And you can carry that with everything.
Absolutely. Sometimes we kind of overglorify perfection. And, part of today's conversation is to find a way to honor our own bodies and honor the things that sometimes the world doesn't see as perfect. And movement and mobility or limited ranges of mobility sometimes have a heavy stigma attached to it. And it's because a big deal of it is that sometimes we're just not factored in, we're not considered. And I know that before we actually, stepped onto stage, we had a conversation in the back talking about our respective journeys in the fitness world. Now, for those who may not know me, I am a multi-sport athlete, and I've been running in this space. I'm a former chef who accidentally, on purpose, got into this space, and I just didn't leave. Most of the people that know me in the fitness realm know me for doing marathons and ultra running. And what makes my story unique for a lot of people is that I'm oftentimes the person that comes in last. And that comes with a huge stigma when even right now we are acknowledging that this is the week of the Boston Marathon, and there's another marathon that's happening, the 26-point True Marathon. And oftentimes when we go to these events, people are scared of being the last. There are other layers of feeling like my humanity is not valid, comes from being a chronically ill athlete. My mobility is sometimes exceptionally compromised. And I know that we have some of those things in common. So every story has a beginning. Can you tell me about your experience of being in the fitness space?
Sure. I began my relationship with movement in the way that many kids do, dancing in the living room. So that was cute and fun. And then once I got into school, it was kind of like, well, you're a woman, so you have to do something that's cute. So you get to run on a treadmill or you get to be a cheerleader. There's nothing else. So I spent most of grade school and whatnot not doing anything else until I picked up playing soccer randomly, playing flag football randomly. And then once I got to college, that was really the first time I started picking up weights. And nobody else that looks like me was in the weight room. And everybody is always, oh, well, be careful. Oh, well, your uterus is gonna fall out. Oh, well, you don't wanna get too muscular. Oh, well, you don't wanna do this and that. Instead of just saying, oh, cool, you're doing something you like, that's awesome. It's a very, I don't know, that's not where women go. And so that was a very interesting part of my movement journey. And then I realized I was actually pretty strong. And so I decided to compete.
Yes.
So I've competed in powerlifting and strongman. And in those spaces, I mean, every space has their gripes, But at least in those spaces, your movement is celebrated, and whatever you can do, you're your own competition. Whatever you can do is celebrated. So that was a nice shift from where I was before, where it was like, why are you lifting weights? That's not for us.
So a lot of what you describe is a lot of what I tackle in this space, talking about the marginalization, the different categories of how people kind of pigeonhole where you belong. And, without putting words in your mouth, what I perceive from listening to parts of that, there is the stigma or the stereotype of what you can do as a woman. And some people may, and I never, assume, I know that your pronouns are she, they.
Yeah.
So some people like me, I identify as a queer person. And sometimes I do not believe in following some of the social constructs that people have that women should and should not be at. And some of the things that I've heard you say was speaking on the marginalization of particularly being a woman and what's perceived as male-dominated spaces. How did close friends and family members initially take to you stepping into that, what I know of from what we talked about,
Right.
our strongman competitions? How did people initially respond to it, and what did it look like over time as you consistently showed up?
That's a great question. I would say my mother, rest her soul, God bless her, she never showed up to one competition and she never wanted to, and we were good. That was fine. All I needed to do was call her when it was over and tell her that I didn't get hurt. That's all she cared about.
Right.
But that form of support, or that form of at least removing the stigmatization, did change over time, of telling me what is wrong and what I should be moving and how I should be moving. Because at the end of the day, it's all made up.
Right.
Who cares at the end of the day? So I might as well do something while I'm on this dusty rock that I enjoy, whether or not you think it's something I should be doing. So it kind of, I just continued to bulldoze and do what I wanted to do. And then around me, everyone was like, oh, all right. And then, interestingly, people that were not interested in that form of movement, didn't know it existed because I kept doing it, got interested in it. So what's the best part of finding movement that you enjoy and making it work for you and just sticking to it is you can inspire other people to do the same. So I've had many people that are like, oh, well, I started lifting weights because I saw you do it, or I saw you pull that truck one time, so I looked up a strongman gym, and they had never thought of that in their life.
Right. Sometimes it's hard to be the first, and it's not that you are the first person to ever do something or be involved in something. Sometimes you are the first person that is touching something that they would consider unique from a family perspective, from a friendship circle, from being that person inside of your work environment. And it takes a lot of grit to be able to show up as yourself. As simple as that sounds, being human, sometimes in this digital age, there's a pressure to perform or sometimes even underperform, especially when we speak about it from the standpoint of visible and invisible disability. Now, I know that you have a unique perspective as well as not just being, speaking about some of these things as having your doctorates in, physical therapy, but you also understand this from a patient standpoint. So let's actually go a little bit into that, if you're open.
Definitely. I think that the reason my book has such a different perspective than other books on fitness and movement is because of that. The fact that I am a patient and a provider, and the fact that I understand that we are imperfect and we don't have to fix everything. We don't have to be moving towards perfection. We just are. And whatever we got, we can work around it. And that's something I've had to come to terms with in my own journey with my own chronic illness. And that grows in both directions, is every time I have a new patient, then I see things in a different perspective and grow from that. So that's why my book has this all of this, it depends. Maybe this. Try that. Think about this. Why don't you make some lists? I can't tell you because I can't. I don't know you. You're a stranger. And so if you pick up any book and they tell you this is going to work, this is the way you could do things, this is the only, that doesn't make sense. They don't know you.
Right. So I hear you on that. I'll say this. I am usually known, at least in social media or when I'm doing talks like this, people know me as a professional loudmouth. So I am not afraid to advocate for myself, but sometimes there's a burden of being exhausted to always be that person, to have to advocate or defend yourself. In a perfect world, things would just be simply accessible. We would be considered and factored in. But the reality of it is that a lot of us who are differently abled, move differently, show up in rooms differently, there are things that just are not typically considered. And when we speak about that from a medical environment, how does someone, what you say from your professional standpoint, how do you advocate for yourself when you feel like you tapped everything in your limits and you don't feel like you've been heard?
Right. Yeah, that's a very big thing and a very hard thing to deal with as the patient, because you're already showing up, you're already taking time out of your day, because for some reason, doctors are only open during business hours. So you're already missing out on money. You already have a copay. Lord knows what the bill's going to be once you leave. And you have everything else outside of that moment to worry about. But here you are in the moment and they don't hear you. I would definitely, some hard set tips to try out would be writing things down before the visit, would be bringing a friend with you if you can to help take some of that emotional labor of having to speak up for yourself and feel like, I gotta be big and brave. Bring a friend if you can and write things down beforehand. And also just take the thought with you that your doctor is having the privilege of being a part of your team. That's your choice. They work with you. They're a part of your team. It's collaborative. There shouldn't be a power dynamic. It shouldn't be, I say this, so you have to do it. Your presence in their room is a privilege. You don't have to be there. You could go. So that sort of mindset can kind of help make some small shifts as well, because sometimes it can feel daunting. They're the expert. They have the degree. They went to school. Yes, that's true. But they might not be the one for you, and that's okay.
Right. And not everybody in here, I'm safely assuming that not everybody in here wants to hear it from like an athletic, standpoint. Maybe we want to hear this from, a daily standpoint. How do we show up in our offices? How do we advocate for ourselves in our everyday life? I know that just from having a very open and transparent story, I get a lot of negative or unsolicited feedback. I won't even position it as negative feedback. Sometimes people always say what's the common thing that we hear? We hear, I just want to help. And I firmly like my nose. My nose I'm not going to say that word because there's a child in the room, but it's a 4-letter word that I actually have here on my shirt that I consider them very, very wonderful and pretty when I exercise that, when I say my nose. But I know that is not something that comes easy to a lot of people. How do you find the words to properly say your nose and express your nose, not just in a medical environment, but maybe for people who are just like, I just want to help, and particularly around movement?
Definitely. It can be hard to enter movement spaces. You go to a gym and they're telling you, oh, well, maybe you should pick up this dumbbell instead. Or you go to a yoga class and they're constantly over cueing and telling you how to turn and which way to move. And you're not even doing anything wrong. You just look different. So in those moments, unfortunately, you do have to say, I'm good. No, thank you. I'll ask if I need help. But otherwise, I would say, generally speaking, before you enter the actual moment, is being able to be in tune with your body and be in tune with how you feel when you are not safe. Because if you can tell the difference between how you feel when you are safe and how you feel when someone is talking down to you, when you feel like, this isn't feeling so good in my body, know what that feeling is in your body, because it's a message. It's a message that something needs to be handled right now, right? And sometimes, I say this because sometimes we miss that message and we just keep bulldozing through, and now it's 4 months into a situation where you've been going to the same gym and the guy's been saying the same thing to you, and all of a sudden out of nowhere you blow up. It's because you ignored that message the first time.
Right. So another thing that we are trying to destigmatize is that movement has to be associated with progress. Now, we kind of touched a little bit on that, but what does radical joy or radical movement look like to you?
Like my own personal movement, or what does it mean?
I'm sorry, repeat that one more time.
Like my own personal movement,
Yes.
or what does it mean?
Like your own personal movement.
Gotcha. Okay. So I do talk about this in my book. So you have to get to know your body. You have to get to know how it works and what doesn't work. And once you figure that out, that's kind of the order of the book. Once you figure that out, you can get to what's joyful, what feels good. And also understanding that you might have to do some boring stuff that you don't like so that you can keep doing the stuff that's joyful and good. But my current season of movement is a lot of dancing. So I feel like I've kind of run back to my childhood era. A lot of dancing. I learned how to do swing dancing. I cannot do the kicks and flips and like choppy Charleston type things. That's not me. It's not gonna be me. That's okay. Powerlifting and strongman competition wise has been kind of on the back burner. I'm just vibing at home. And those are pretty much my main sources of joy right now.
I actually saw something on your social media, I believe it was like a couple of days ago, where you were saying that you were introducing movement back after taking a bit of a hiatus. Now, those breaks are sometimes devastating to some people when you feel like I was making progress, I was starting to see these big leaps, and now I'm being yanked back. What ways can we respect our feelings and validate ourselves when we're hitting those low points? And how do we slowly start to introduce those things back in and then actually call those wins? Or I will say, this is kind of a layered question. What if that joy doesn't look the same? How do you remix it then?
Well, the first thing I would say is we could accept that things come in seasons, and that applies to movement too. So maybe you don't feel like running inside, you only like running outside, and it's winter. I'm not gonna run right now, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So I think accepting that movement comes in seasons can be a game changer, and also detaching your ability from your worth. So whether or not you can physically do something doesn't make you a better person. So for example, I haven't really done my physical practice of yoga in a long time. I've been working a lot on like meditation, therapy, breath work, but I haven't been doing handstands and whatever. So the other day I decided to try one, and it wasn't amazing. I didn't hurt myself, but it wasn't great. And I could sit there and belittle myself and say, oh, well, you used to be able to do this, and this wasn't so hard for you before. But also, when it was easy for me, my life was terrible. So who cares?
Right. For me, I heavily relate to that. When I first started running, I remember where it was a different time. I started running 12 years ago. And 12 years ago, I remember signing up, showing up to races, and the cutoffs were somewhere around a 13-minute 30 pace. That was considered the standard of being slow. And anything slower than that, what the language was loaded with, that's a walking pace. And 12 years later, I am significantly slower than that. That movement looks different. And in fact, it actually feels different because my body has changed. One of the things that sometimes is vilified is the idea of aging. The idea, and I think that aging is such a beautiful thing. It says that you're still here, that even if things are not working the way that it was at 25, it deserves to be celebrated at 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and there's like a big stigma that we have to unpack. When we see people who are oftentimes not accommodated in this space, or talked about in books like yours. Like in your book, you actually make a point to, talk about, repositioning, for certain body types. What are some of the things that we are exploring some of the book, which I will encourage people at the end to definitely pick up her book if you haven't. What are some of the ways that you've provided as examples for people who may be plus size, that have a larger body, or for those who are now, their body has changed up, where their mobility is not as limber or flexible as before?
So I just realized the other question I didn't fully answer, so I'm gonna circle back to that after this. But I think we have to recognize that bodies change over time, and that's fine. In any direction. You can become smaller, bigger, you might break an ankle, who knows? We can't control everything. The only thing that we can control is accepting that something will change. So understanding that when you come to a movement and it doesn't feel the same in your body anymore, or you're looking at the standard and you can't do it, like the standard 13 minutes, you can't do it, or like a standard push-up and you're like, I can't do that, that's fine. It doesn't matter if you can do the standard, because that won't necessarily define your life and who you are. And if you examine why you're doing the motion, then that's really what matters. So if you're doing the motion because you want to be like somebody else, maybe don't do that.
Right. Right.
That's probably not the best idea, to seek a form of exercise. So if you're unable to move in ways that make something make sense for you, then that's where you bring in exercise variations or modifications, which are perfectly fine and good and normal. So if you can't squat to the floor and get down on the floor to do a kneeling exercise, and you decide I'm gonna do it in standing instead, that doesn't mean you made it easier, that just means you made it work for you. If you can't do a push-up, like I said earlier, and you say, you know what, I'm gonna stand against this wall and do a wall push-up, that doesn't mean you made it easier, or you're taking an easy way out, you made it work for you. And so that's really what's important, is making things work for you, because it's your body. You should be, I hope, you're doing it for you, not to meet any standard, not to meet any look, or achieve some level of perfect motion, because that's not real.
So basically, we're talking about sustainability, sustainability and adaptability. Oftentimes I remember, like, let's take the yoga class example, and we think about the yoga blocks, or we think about, what is that mat called? But pretty much like you would roll it up and you would put it underneath you to support you. I find that poses like, for any of my yoga people in here, Warrior 3, or the things that people consider as the complex movements, I sometimes find those to be easier. And I have such a hard way to go when it comes down to things like child pose, because my hips are they're incredibly tight. That may come from my combination of doing powerlifting, and then of course my health issues and my mobility issues are sometimes a hard way to go. How do we destigmatize using the blocks, destigmatize using the apparatus that's available in the room, especially when we're in group environments where everybody else may not be using it, or they look at it as, you don't really need that?
Group classes can be tough, especially if it's something that you've never done, so you don't really know anything besides what the instructor is telling you. And it can be hard because you're gonna be in the back of the class like, this sucks. I'm not doing this good. It feels bad. And you're gonna leave feeling bad about yourself, when really that's a reflection of the teacher. You should not ever be leaving you're paying someone for a service and they didn't give you a good one. So if you keep leaving group classes and feeling like I can't keep up, it must be me, and it's not you, it's them. The only thing about that situation is you have to broaden who's doing that modality. You have to broaden like who you're following. So looking up people. So if you're plus size, and it's yoga, and you're like, this is not working for me. Going online and just type plus size yoga teacher. Look for it. Maybe it exists, If you're trying to get into bodybuilding and you're looking at the different exercises and you're like, well, I can't do that. I don't have the mobility. Then you could look up bodybuilding for wheelchair users. Look it up. Somebody's doing it somewhere. And kind of try and see if you could find someone that's doing it that you can relate to and follow along with, see who they follow, see what their offerings are. And then once you can take that, and also through the exercises in the book, once you can take that and understand what your body needs, then you can go to that group class where the teacher doesn't know how to help you, even though they should.
Yeah, so like I know that, that's not something that may be accessible for some people who may not be internet savvy, So, for those type of people, I heavily encourage people to just go right back to the grassroots of things, of just, if you're not, internet savvy, you're not into social media, you're not gonna Google search, I just think that, to kind of add on to what you said, is I encourage you to just go outside and take a breath and just honor where you are right now, not who you're going to be in the future, not, chasing a ghost, but just really honoring who you are right now. And sometimes those communities, they will find you, and that may come from going outside and taking a walk, or just going outside and being present, communicating with other people along the way, tapping into community centers, of that nature, or maybe even speaking to a medical professional who may have those resources of, here's a community that is worth investing or looking into. So speaking of investments, a big part of accessibility sometimes can come from a financial standpoint. It could be financially devastating, especially for, and this is actually another conversation we were having in the back. The biggest thing that sometimes when people see that we are differently abled, people are trying to discourage you from being part of certain spaces. Well, why don't you just stay home? But then you're vilified about being a person on the sofa, or vilified for utilizing certain services. How do we unpack that, all of the layers that maybe we're not even so much getting from other people, but the things that we've learned over the years that we told ourselves that we cannot utilize? Do you have any recommendations as far as maybe, a medical professional, or maybe tapping into community once again, or maybe steps that you just want to take on your own before exploring that, because that may be a financial burden?
Yeah, definitely. I think that was the idea of my book and the way that it's written, because access can mean money, access can mean physically getting somewhere. Maybe you don't have a car. Access could mean time. Maybe you work 2 jobs. So that's kind of the foundational aspect of the book, is taking you through, okay, how does my body work? Okay, what are things that are in my control? What can I do? Okay, what are things that I can do to eat better? Not necessarily eat better with diet advice or anything, but just surrounding food and hydration and rest, and how can I organize my life in a way that it makes sense. And the book also has kind of explanations of even pain, different types of pain. And if you have this type of pain, this is the kind of specialist, if you can see, that you can see. But if you can't, at least you have some knowledge to be able to work on that on your own time and understand the things that are happening in your body. Not knowing what's happening in your own body can lead to you just jumping to any snake oil salesman, on the internet. Somebody just sells you cure your fibroids with this tea, and you're gonna be like, yeah, because you're just looking for a quick fix. And unfortunately for pretty much everything, there's no such thing as a quick fix. But at least understanding what's going on in your body can help you slow down a little bit and unpack. And I also feel that we are very disconnected from our bodies at default, and that's not helping us. We're so, and that can be a measure of access, because maybe you're working, you get home, you gotta feed the kids, okay, you take a shower, okay, time to go to sleep, okay, go to work again. And you don't have time to breathe and think. You don't have time, right? We always have that time to be present and be in our own bodies, but sometimes that gets missed. And it's easy to keep missing that. And so when you try to come to movement and stress your body out, push it to its limit, and you don't even know what your body feels like at baseline, you're gonna run into trouble. Things won't make sense.
Right. So, just thinking about your entire experience, your entire journey to where you are and where you're going, what would you say to your former self when maybe at some point you didn't think that you were possible, and now you are an author, you are teaching people how to move in ways that the language just was not there for a number of years, and you're destigmatizing that for several of us in the room. How would you speak to maybe 10-year-old version of yourself, or to someone else here in the room who's just not fully convinced that it's safe for them to show up as themselves?
That's a great question. I would say, on a very personal level, my mother passed away, and when she passed away, I sat there and I thought about it. I was like, that was like 2 or 3 months. Like, life, as corny as it sounds, is short. If my life could change that swiftly, why am I worried about how many calories is in this iced coffee right now? If I could lose everything in a couple of months, why do I care if this is the best flattering waistline that you can? I don't care. Anything could happen. God forbid, somebody throw some sage and get a rabbi or whatever, but God forbid, we could leave here and something could happen, right? We don't have control over that. So what I do have control over is the choices that I can make. And I'm gonna make choices that make my life better. And it doesn't have to make sense to anybody else, because nobody else is living my life.
Right.
So if I wanna go try Highland games and throw bales of hay over a stick, and I find that fun, then I'm gonna go do that.
Right.
It doesn't have to make sense to anybody else.
I hear that. Now, that was a lot for me to even process. I'm like, okay, my 10-year-old version now, I'm self-heard that, I am a person that sometimes I'm just like, this feels like a weight. It feels like a weight to always be in defense of my body. I just want to show up. I want to be able to participate like everybody else. I want to be celebrated in rooms just like everybody else. And this discussion is not to say this is the cure, because like you said in the beginning, any book that would sell you on this notion that it has to be done one way, or even, when we see movements like the body positive movement or even fat acceptance movement, sometimes the feedback that I'll get in my respective space is that those things that you're talking about just don't align with me. I want to remind people that it is okay if one particular part does not align with you. I encourage us all to be courageous in our own wonderful and glorious ways. We may not wake up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, you know what, I accepted everything. How can we actually honor just right there at this moment? How can we honor one thing or two things about ourselves and celebrate it, and eventually just build up over time? So with that being said, and I know that we're getting close to time, I just want to say thank you. You are, even though I know that you're not an influencer, you are an impact leader. You are a change maker. And from conversations like yours, you are forging the path for so many other people that are going to step into this space and feel validated and be able to say and versus a but. So thank you so much for everyone for being in attendance today. And I would love to transition this into the question and answer portion of our conversation. I will remind you that if you would like to still submit those questions, you can submit it to Slido, or you can feel comfortable coming to the mic, and of course, we can adjust it for you if you have any questions. So does anyone, let's see if anybody wants to step up at the moment. Anybody would like to ask a question, feel free to just raise your hand, or you can just line up right here and just come on through. Remember to say your name. Oh, yeah. Hi.
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 Well, come a little bit closer. Come closer. Don't worry, the mic not gonna hurt you.
Hi. My name's Elise. I'm a first-year DPT student.
Nice.
And I feel like a lot of the things that we've been talking about in school with like how to talk to patients, we talk a lot about essentially being, encouraging and also trying to, like when patients are saying, I can't do this, or this, is too hard, or I'm bad at things, sort of gently pushing back on that. And at the same time, like I'm interested in working with like dancers and athletes, and included in that are going to be people with like chronic illnesses and disabilities and things. And I think a lot of times when you're working with those populations, it's also really important to like acknowledge and honor that like sometimes you can't do things, or maybe you can't do things today. So I guess I'm curious how you navigate that, I guess like with your patients or with yourself and your own body.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to understand what's your bare minimum. What can you do on your low battery day, right? Like, when your phone's at 20%, you're not gonna film a video, right? You're gonna cool it off a little bit. You're not gonna stream on YouTube. You know what you can do when there's 20% left. You're gonna put it down. You're not gonna scroll Instagram. So kind of understanding that in your own body, okay, if you're at your lowest of lows, what can you handle? And sometimes that can be hard for people to figure out because we're so disconnected from our bodies. And so that's why, especially as physical therapists, we really get to know our patients because it all matters. They come to your session, sure, it's an hour of the day, but their whole life is with them. It's not like they just turn it off and all the problems are gone. So we do end up finding out a lot, because if someone is there for you for knee pain, that's great, but you're going to ask, okay, well, what do you do for work? Okay, what does your day look like when you get home? Okay, what do your weekends look like? Okay, are you a caregiver? Oh, okay. So you're going to find out all of those things, and from that, hopefully make a picture of what's the barest of minimums that you can do. Because if you have to do things lighter one day, that's fine. They're not going to lose every bit of progress they made.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you so much for asking that question. Anyone else would like to step to the mic? Don't be shy.
Get any on there?
If not, then I can always move on to the questions that's on the pad. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I do have a question here. Can you talk about anxiety, about exercise and movement? Like, I'm afraid if I do too much or the wrong thing, my chronic pain will get worse.
Okay. Well, so the first thing is, again, the feeling of what do you feel like when you're safe in your body? And what do you feel like when things are amiss? Understanding that. And then, what is the least amount of exercise that you could do? And do that. And if you feel that feeling of, oh, I'm unsafe, you're doing the least amount that you can do. You can tell yourself the thoughts are just thoughts. They're not facts, right? They're just clouds floating. And you could point to it and be like, no, that's not true today. I'm not doing anything that hard. I'll be fine. So basically reframing not only the situation, but the thoughts. So if you're, for example, afraid of, let's say, going for a run, right? Maybe don't run 2 miles, right? Maybe cut that distance by a quarter and do that consistently over time until you finally believe that you're going to be fine, and then progress it. It's okay to take your time. And I think when you are starting off unsure of how things will feel and unsure of the results you're going to get, you're going to have to take your time and slow it down, which to other people might look like you're not pushing yourself hard enough. But again, they're not in your body. It doesn't matter.
And I want actually, if you don't mind, I would actually love to piggyback on that from an athletic standpoint. Just like as a person that does this every day, and I've had to throw away a lot of outsiders' perspectives on how I'm supposed to perform, and trying to remind myself not to inherit that you should approach. I encourage you to just throw away the shoulds and acknowledge where you are at the moment. And don't be so afraid of the idea of fear. Sometimes fear is a measurement tool. It is a litmus scale to letting you know what your limits are, because sometimes that fear is actually keeping you honest. So it's admirable when we can see all the social media posts, or we see an article about that person that persevered through, agonizing conditions. That's admirable. But you know what else is also admirable? Staying home. Staying home when your body is saying, you know what? I need another 2 weeks. I need another 2 hours. I need another 2 days. And there's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes your body is basically sounding off an alarm, letting you know that maybe right now is just not the moment to actually do that. So that's really like my contribution. I do see a couple other questions that's actually popping up here. So what recommendations do you have for women in perimenopause and menopause when our bodies are going through so many changes?
Number one, we're going to need some form of journaling. You're not going to remember what's happening.
Yes.
So I like to think of perimenopause as the opposite puberty, right? So if you remember when you were a teenager and nothing makes sense, or if you have a teenager and nothing makes sense, one day they're hungry and one day they don't want to eat at all, you might be feeling those sorts of things. You might be feeling more sensitive to temperature. You might be feeling different things in terms of swelling in your body. Who knows? Anything can happen. So we're gonna need something either written down or an app on your phone. We need something that's tracking what's happening and what you feel in your body, because it's going to be hard to figure out what is it's because I ate onions yesterday, and what is it just is. Because you're going to have things that just are, and it's not going to be easy to keep track of, because you're going to have some brain fog and you're going to be stressed and irritable. So I would say, number one, we need some sort of journaling, whether that's an app, whether that's pen and paper, whether you buy an actual journal that's like my movement tracker or whatever, and it has what did I eat today? How did I feel today? How much sleep did I get? And really paying attention to your body and how it feels. And then we can consider adding movement to it.
I can definitely vouch for this. And I don't believe in TMI, so I'm just going to openly say that last year I had a hysterectomy, and things are changing. I am going to be 40 this year, and some of the things that I believed before is that I had to be of a certain age before I would feel any of those symptoms. And I kid you not, it was like one of the most. It was one of the bad pieces of advice that I actually received. Some of the clearances that I got was basically getting a blood test just to assess where I was at hormonally. And some of the things that I was feeling, I had to really ask myself, is it perimenopause trying to actually enter the chat? Or is this an ache or a pain that's coming and is coming from something else, especially as a person who already have chronic conditions? Oftentimes, some of these things are mimicking or looking like something else. And right now, I count my blessings that the stiff shoulder thing wasn't a thing that was going to stay here for too long. Another question that is on here, besides movement for everybody, are there other resources you'd recommend for individuals interested in finding the right type of movement for their bodies?
So, spoiler alert, the back of the book has a list of books. So all of those.
That's code for if you don't have that book. This is a great opportunity to pick up the book tonight.
No, I actually just have really bad recall.
Yes.
Don't ask me to make a list.
Marcia can actually sign it. It's wonderful. And the last question I actually have here, if there's no other questions here, do you have a go-to song? I'm going to rephrase that. Do you have a go-to pump-up song, or maybe a top few songs? Which I love this question, actually.
So it depends. It depends. My music taste, and then the vibe and the mood. It depends. Now, if I'm in a mood where, and kind of going back to all of the questions about how do I figure out how to move, I am my own person, right? I'm taking care of me. So, if you have a baby that's irritable, you're going to be like, okay, is she hungry? Does she need to poop? Is she gassy? Does she need a nap? Is she just lonely, right? So when I'm feeling kind of and I don't feel like exercising, I'll go through that checklist. Did I eat? Did I poop today? Mm-hmm. Do I need to use the bathroom? Do I just need a hug? And then I'm like, you know what? No, I'm fine. I can exercise. And I'm not in the mood, I'm going to play my Funk Fever, disco playlist.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely, I'm a person that's a fan of Spotify list. And I don't know if y'all remember that period called the pandemic. During the pandemic, I think all of us were making playlists. Some of those things had us dropping for the 99 and 2000. I know the little ones will not remember that era. And then there's times where I want to have that nostalgic feeling where I tap into some of the music that my parents had me listening to. I was the 85 kid who was listening to 70s music, and there is something about this generation that is bringing back some of those songs and using it in their reels and their TikToks and all other stuff or whatever. But those songs are amazing to load onto a playlist. It's just feel-good music to just put out there. And if you're one of those people that's like, you know what, I don't want to hear any words during your workouts, tap into jazz. And there's different types of jazz that's out there.
I would say tap into Khruangbin. I love Khruangbin. Yes. I definitely love. There are times where my music is very chill and relaxed, and that's why I love working out at home, because I don't always want somebody yelling at me.
Right.
But I will say, if I'm going to do something hard, like a physical, 1 rep max, or a hard handstand, and I need to focus and I need to feel like, it's gonna be Meg Thee Stallion's going to be on rotation.
Yes.
Yes. I'm going to call in the power of Meg Thee Stallion, of the hot girl Meg, pull that confidence into my body, and then do something hard. Yeah. Don't
play it around your kids, but it's all right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning into this conversation. We appreciate you. From here, I just want everyone to just think to yourself, what does it mean to you besides the physical, example of it? What does it mean to you to actually be human? So just take that with you tonight as you go home to your families, or just going home and just really just honoring your own bodies, because oftentimes we're thinking about being human of what we're offering to somebody else, and we're not actually prioritizing ourselves. So I want to say thank you, Dr. Marcia, for just bringing your love and your energy into this space. And I hope that you follow Dr. Marcia on social, as well as, of course, by the book. And then just look out for other events that may be on their calendar. Do you have any events that you would actually like to plug before we close out?
Well, there is an online strength class from the Disability Cultural Center. So if you're on the socials and you can type that in, you'll find them. That is free. They're based in San Francisco. It is free and virtual, so you're welcome to join. That's next week.
Awesome. And for me, my name is LaToya Shauntay Snell. I am L Shauntay if you're nasty. That's a little Janet Jackson throwback for y'all. But I am on social media, as well as I am going to be doing a full marathon tour. I typically go from several cities. So some of those cities include New York City, Chicago. I'm possibly going to be going to Scottsdale this year, as well as several other cities where I like to use my marathon tours and shorter distances to be able to interact with communities in person. A lot of the communities that I tend to amplify are communities of color, people who are chronically ill or physically limited, and mental disabilities. I am a person who is neurodivergent. I have ADHD, and sometimes people take a lot of my extroverted appearing ways and don't realize that sometimes I am overstimulated and I'm just like, I need a timeout. Please, somebody give me a nap. Just give me like a juicy box and just let me just stay here in this corner. So sometimes, I will say, well, I'll end with this. Give each other grace. Because even when we may be part of a marginalized community, sometimes we get so caught up in our own narrative that it's hard for us to actually look at others and be empathetic to theirs as well.